Okay, picking up on page 78, I believe, we're talking about the strategies you can use for obtaining this competitive advantage. Differentiation is basically where you have, your product is radically different than everyone else's. The niche strategy. That is, I never intended to be a volume producer. I'm going to be producing only these small quantities, like sports cars. Porsche probably doesn't need to produce, a lot of cars. They concentrate on just, small sports cars, very expensive, but nevertheless. So they operate a niche. The next one talks about altering the industry structure. And this is sort of like, instead of having, the example they give is, let's say that the two airlines got together and came up with an alliance that, we're going to use your hub over here, we're going to use your hub over there, and so we're going to do cost sharing across, and therefore we're going to lower the cost of flights between city A and city B. Okay. The idea is that these companies can come in and make a really significant change to the industry that forces all the rest of the participants to say, well, dang, I guess we're going to have to do that too. Right? Okay. So whenever somebody does something that uproots the industry, they have to also do something as well. The next one is talking about creating new products and services. Now, Apple is pretty good at this. They produce new products every once in a while that everyone just falls in love with and everyone wants to have. So that's a good way of having a competitive advantage. Improving existing product lines and services. This is where, I'm producing the same thing over and over again, but I'm making little tweaks to it. Now, I'll give you the flip side of that, okay? Have you seen all the goofy commercials on TV for pizzas? And, they have pizza with, stuffed crust with cheese, and they have pretzel, and this, all sorts of weird stuff. And quite frankly, what they're trying to do is just add new products to keep themselves relevant. Personally, I wish they just leave it the hell alone. When I order my pizza, I don't want any goofy shit. I want pizza. Okay. But yes, what they're trying to do is to differentiate themselves and just make improvements to the existing product lines to keep themselves relevant. Innovation is a good competitive strategy. You have to keep going. Companies have to come in, and often these innovations are kind of subtle. Perhaps you're not even aware of them, but they'll make a little change to an organization and to get better and better and better, or have a higher profit margin or something. There's also all sorts of other strategies like first to market. That's a good one. Sales growth. Like right now, I'm trying to corner the market. You've probably heard that term before, right? Right now I have 22% of the market, but I'm going to reduce my price so I can get 36% of the market. And once I've achieved that, I'm probably going to raise my price back up a little bit. So all sorts of weird strategies. And first to market, if there's a new thing coming and you can get it out first, you're probably going to get a heck of a lot of sales, coming through. There's lots of others. Then there's all these combinations of these things, where you have just, I'm a first to market and I'm a whatever. You just combine them all together. Okay. I'm going to add a section in here that we're going to talk about a little bit later. It's not really in the book, so you have to pay attention. And that is, whenever you're making changes to an organization, there's basically, it's sort of like the history of automation in business, all right? So, essentially, there's 3 phases where you can increase productivity. What happened originally when computers came out is you automated existing systems. So you had a system and you had a production line and you automated the production line. So that was like phase 1. Phase 1 was all about automating everything. Okay. Well, after a while, everyone was automated. And so you didn't really have much of a competitive advantage over your rivals because, it didn't take very long for everyone to automate their existing system. So phase 2 was I'm trying to compete against my competitors. In other words, I'm Ford and I'm competing against Chevy. So whatever Chevy does, I have to do, and whatever I do, Chevy has to do. So first is phase 1 is just automate existing systems. Phase 2 was I'm doing things to be more competitive against my rivals. Okay? And that doesn't last very long, believe it or not, because you just chase your own tail there for a while. The third phase, which is really where we're at now, is I'm in competition with myself. I know that I can produce 1,200 widgets a day. And I'm thinking, I really want to be able to do 1,300 widgets a day. So I don't care what my competitors are doing. I want to make tweaks to my system to get me a little better. So I'm not in competition with my rivals. I'm in competition with myself. So phase 1 is automate existing. Phase 2 is compete with my rivals. And phase 3 is just tweak the hell out of it. And so I'm in competition with myself. Okay, now back to the book. Okay. The next thing you talk about is kind of a different. They change and talk about financial evaluation, because clearly you're not going to be making these decisions just on a whim. You're going to be going in there and saying, there's a financial reason for doing this. There must be a business reason, a valid business reason to make a change. Perhaps you've heard that before. If not, you will hear it a lot more. Okay, so there's lots of different ways of thinking about this, and one is just cash flow. In other words, I want to increase cash flow. That might be one way of analyzing a change. I'm getting ready to make a change, and so I want to see if my cash flow goes up or down. Okay. Time value of money. And if you're an accountant, you're probably rolling your eyes, but a simplistic way of looking at it is $1 spent today is not worth the same as $1 spent yesterday. We're not necessarily just talking about inflation. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about investment potential. If today I invested in your project and it got me 5% improvement, great. But if today I took that same money and I invested it in the stock market and got 10%, well then why would I do your project, right? So the time value of money is how much my money is worth something now, but it's going to be something more in the future. Time value of money. Payback period, kind of simple. It's one of those things where I put in money, and I got to tell you this story. This is a crazy story. So 10 million years ago, there was this weird period of time in U.S. history where the government was under the misguided impression that we were running out of natural gas. Hey, go figure. And so they dictated that all federal buildings built could not use natural gas. Okay, so we built this building and it didn't have natural gas. Well, it didn't take very long for someone to figure out, wait a minute. You got sold a bill of goods. We are not running out of natural gas. So I did a project to convert these boilers from fuel oil to natural gas. And we calculated the payback period. And so it's going to cost this amount of money, and how much money is it going to take to make off that investment? And the payback period was something like 3 months. That converting these boilers over to natural gas, we had a payback period of 3 months. Typically the payback period is, like 3 or 4 years. But if it's really, really good project, well then, it just gets really, really short payback period. Okay, let's continue. So the next thing you talk about is this internal rate of return. There are techniques that you can use to kind of compare investments. And I kind of mentioned to you before that, if I have $1 million and I could invest $1 million in a lot of securities, bonds and stuff, stocks, or I could take that $1 million and give it to you, and you could do this automated project we're talking about. So there's a way that I can compare different types of options, and it's called the internal rate of return. I'm not going to go through the details of it. Anyway, and net present value is kind of the term that they use to describe it. It's kind of an interesting way of describing, assigning a number to an option. Here's the 4 options, and this one has 12, and this one has 14. It's kind of a unitless kind of a thing that talks about what the rate of return is. Okay, so this is not a finance class, so consider that covered, and we're ready to move on. On page 82, I talk about the careers. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I will tell you that the current trends in the automation business has to do with mobile and web and cloud. So, some sort of a mobile scenario, some sort of cloud-based scenario, some sort of web-based scenario. That's what it's all about right this very second. There's a cool little chart here that talks about what the prediction is for these lines of computer career choices. And database administrators have always led on the prices. Those are high-dollar people. But there's not that many of them. Software developers, they don't make quite so much, but there are one heck of a lot of those guys. And so this is kind of a cool chart showing what some people are predicting for both the number of jobs and the salaries for jobs. Kind of cool. One of the things we have to talk about is hiring people coming in. And, like the visa system, the 1HB visas as an example. One of the things that's kind of weird is people get kind of nuts over this, and they don't really understand. It's kind of turned into a political fight rather than a practical fight. Here's the real true story. The true story is lots of other companies have realized that the United States has kind of gone soft in the hard technical sciences, the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM classes have gone down. We used to be the place that produced the most number of engineers as any other country in the world. That is not the case now. China now produces tons more engineers than we do. So if you're trying to hire high-quality people, software database people, engineers, then you're actually, there's an awful lot of them out there. But, man, it's just a lot easier to go to some of these other countries. India, for example, they talk about in here that 58% of the 1HB visas are coming from India. And this is on purpose. I mean, the Indian government sat down and said, this would be a great idea if we, tweaked our college system to produce these types of jobs because the market elsewhere needs them. Okay. So, don't think of this as, they're taking my job. That's not necessarily the true story. The true story is it would take me 6 months to recruit for that position because they're just not there. Versus I could get a 1HB in tomorrow. Okay, that's kind of what that's about. So if you ask yourself why do we need a 1HB visa system, it really has to do with the supply and demand. And don't let the politics get involved and talk about, well, we need to reduce these. They're doing this just to cut salaries. And it's like, no, that's not exactly how it works. It's not. They're really doing it because they just can't quite hire the number of people they need to hire. Okay, the next thing to talk about is like the roles and functions. And I'm kind of go through this in kind of a hurry. I will tell you that, you can go through this. It talks about, where you fit in the corporate structure. Are you a system analyst? Are you a such and such? Basically where you fit in this thing. I will tell you that, the titles, what is a CIO and what is a chief this, and that, and the other. Again, modestly interesting. You can go through and read this on your own. I will tell you that if you're trying to come up with a resume and you want one of these jobs, but you don't really have that much experience, there are some alternatives. And it has to do with certifications. You go in there and get some sort of industry level certification as a substitute for experience. And that kind of sort of works. And it basically shows a little bit of initiative. Another thing you need to be able to be aware of when you're working with a resume is almost everyone works in teams now. So you have to have some way of showing that on your resume. Okay, we have reached the end of the chapter. And we'll see you guys again in some future chapter.